And good evening, everybody, and welcome to Monday. It's time to natter on about all sorts of writery things, as we do. And welcome back, because I wasn't here last week, because I was recovering from my epic journey to Scotland, which is, by the standards of the UK, quite a long way. By the standards of many other countries, it's like, really? That's an afternoon's drive? I know, but also, yeah, spending a long time in the car. I like driving, but driving that kind of distance is not my favourite thing. I have to say, it feels like an awfully long way, even with the modern comforts of cruise controls and air conditionings and stuff. But anyway, I survived. I'm back. I'm here. Everything is good. Okay, and welcome once and welcome all again back to the writing stream here on Monday. So it's good to see you all. I hope you're all good. Who do we have on the stream tonight? We have the Harkonnens. As always, ready to invade Arrakis. We have Arrakis ready to fend off the invasion of the Harkonnens. Wintermute GB is here, of course. And Commander Terra Firma Glenn is back from. When you're travelling around mountains and stuff, or something quite exciting as well, Glenn. That sounds quite. There's some good pictures, anyway. So I'm not quite sure where you went, but it looked nice. That's good. Kelly Bagler is here. Who thinks again? And welcome to you, of course. Chris Fikey is here. Good to see you, Chris. Stumpy73. Alan is here as well. Commander Doston is here. And the Stone Cold Mason is here as well. It's good. It's from Portsmouth. It's a long way. Yeah, I don't think I've even ever been to Portsmouth. South Coast things sort of west of where I live. I must admit, I haven't really. I went to Brighton once, as far west as I've been. No, actually, that's not true. I've been to Exeter. I think I've been to Land's End. I think, but my knowledge of that part of the world is very vague. So I really ought to go explore it a bit more. So it's Colorado near Denver. Oh, I've flown in and out of Denver Airport once, so that's good. But Colorado sounds nice. Yeah, that's quite pretty. Is it the Rockies there? Does the Rockies go all the way down? Because I tend to think of the Rockies as being a mountain range in Canada, but of course it's quite a big mountain range, isn't it? It goes all the way down to America as well. Oh, you hiked around in the Rockies. Excellent. Good for you. Well done. I'm impressed. Dr. Nagel is here as well, and Commander JL 1980 here is good. So good evening, welcome one and welcome all to the hopefully increasingly accurate Nick Layden writing screen. The Rockies go all the way down to New Mexico to that. Okay. So it's a big mountain range. Yep. Okay. That is a long old way, isn't it? So presumably it's not. Is Alaska the top of the Rockies? I must have. Did I miss you, Mad Monksoft? I'm sorry. Oh, apologies. Mad Monksoft is here too, everybody. Give him a round of applause. I'm sorry to hear your marriage is on the rocks. Good stuff. Yes, everyone give Mad Monksoft a cheer. Nobody's giving Mad Monksoft a cheer apart from himself. So anyway. That seems to have solved the problem. Anyway, welcome one and welcome all. And it's good to be back. It's good to be back talking about writing things. Now, things are afoot. Things are afoot. There we go. Glenn's chiming in. Things are afoot with the writing. It's a sad life. We're all there, Mad Monks. We're all there with you. To be honest, we're all there with you. Chris has been gone too long and too often, and I need to get back into it and wreak a modicum of havoc. Chris, feel free to be. Wrecking some havocs. Yeah, that's always fun. That's always fun. Now, today we obviously have a topic. Now, yeah, things are afoot. We obviously have a topic today, which is basically going to finish off my series of writing streams, which I've been running for the last, I don't know, how many months? 2 or 3 months now? Yeah, the kind of collected knowledge of the Drew, such as that is. And the reason for that is it's timing rather coincidentally, as it happens, with a new series of Monday evening things that we're going to be doing now in combination with Fantastic Books Publishing, who are the current publishers of my various books and stuff. I'm going to be hosting. They've got an event. Okay, they've got an event that's running in September and October called Mabel. And Mabel is an acronym cunningly wrought out of letters, as acronyms are, which stands for Multiple Authors Book Launch Event. Now I must admit, I'm not launching a book at the moment, but I'm helping with a bit of publicity for all the other authors that they've got, who some of whom are launching books. Okay, so what's going to happen is that the Monday evening stream is actually now going to be me interviewing some other writers for a change. So we're going to do something different for the next few weeks, probably about 5 or 6 weeks, I think it is. We're going to have some guest author types on the stream, and you know, as the you know, the willing audience will be able to chuck questions at them, and generally make them kind of go, what stupid question is that? You know, the usual stuff that I have to deal with. So just to kind of whet your appetite, we have so we have some interviews. So we have some of you will know Kate Russell of Elite fame. She's coming on with another lady called Kay next week. So 2 ladies coming on the stream to talk about writing books of a game. Now Kay has actually written up, and I'm going to play this as well for those of you who are into the ferret lady. Yes, okay, so the ferret questions are all for Kate Russell. So Kate Russell basically is the author of Mostly Harmless, which is one of the original Elite books from way back in 2014 now. Good grief, that's like 8 years ago. So there's that whole writing for space games thing in there. Now Kay is an interesting lady. Now I haven't actually met her, and I believe she's in the States, so we're still working out kind of time zones and weird stuff like that. So next week it should be the 19th, I'm hoping, because I'm not 20th of September. It's not the 20th, is it? It can't be the 20th. No, it's the 19th. So next Monday, the 19th. Okay. So Kate has been on my stream before talking about various stuff. So we're having Kate back, Kate Russell, but another lady called Kay who has written a book based on another game, and that game I'm looking at, where is it? I've got a list of it here. It's a game now. It's on Steam, I believe. It's a game called Starbound, which I haven't played yet, but I'm being told that somebody somewhere nice, it's probably Kay, is arranging a Steam key for me so I can play it on one of my Saturday morning kind of retro streams. So I might take a brief gap out of X Beyond the Frontier to play a game I've not played before, because there is a book that Kay has written about this game, which I believe is a sort of 2D platformer sort of game. Quite how you go writing a book about a 2D platformer game, I'm not quite sure, but that's obviously one of the first questions that we're going to be asking. So that's coming up as well. I need to interview Alan. Yes, well, Alan, I think what we could do, Alan, we could probably tag you into the end of one of the Mondays. So leave that with me. I will go organise that. That'd be quite good. Who else have we got coming up? We've got 2 other authors, Mark Henderson and Walt Pitcher. I'll get you a bit more detail about them. Raymond Marrett, who some of you may know, who has written an excellent book, a space adventure book, which isn't Elite, but is kind of spacey and stuff, which is really, really good. We have I will have a session somewhere in there doing some Shaybuddy stuff as well, but we'll see if we can squidge you in there as well, Alan, because I think that might be quite good fun. We've got James Vigor. Some of you may know James as well, who is has written his first sci-fi novel, which is actually very, very good. I've read that one, quite enjoyed that. And Jack Mann, who I haven't met, but we'll have a chat with him as well. They've basically written their first science fiction novel, so we'll see if we can get Alan in there as well. That'd be quite good. And then we've got kind of at the end of October, Stuart Aiken and Linda. Now they've both written kind of eco-thriller novels, which have got kind of a slightly more interesting take on sort of science fiction stuff. So there's quite a variety of stuff coming up, basically. So about for the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to be doing some author interviews on the stream. So just so you know what's coming up. And if you want to find out anything more about it, it is, if you look at the Fantastic Books Publishing website, there is a kind of thing on Mabel there, which you can go and look up if you want to go and have a look. So there we go. Gate and K. Didn't everyone tell you not to name your characters with such similar sounding name? I know. It's not my fault. They all. I'm just told what I'm doing. Drew, you're interviewing these people, right? Okay, then carry on. I do what I'm told. I'm married. That's how these things work. So hopefully some insights into some novels, probably some novels you could quite enjoy based on how they're going to be described. There's a few questions. So I've kind of given all the authors various these are the sort of things that are probably going to be interesting to talk about. But if you want to concoct weird and wonderful questions and think about things that you can chuck in their direction. I will do my best to field all the questions and see if we have an interesting discussion. But that's what's coming up. Okay, that's what's coming up. Now all I've got to do is make my Streamlabs work with Discord, get all the authors to make sure that their Discord works, and make sure everything happens on the night, and everything will be fine. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So there we go. So there we go. So that's what's coming up. But tonight we have got a topic, and to finish off the writing stream, I thought a slightly serious topic. We have touched on this before, actually. Monksoft is going to talk about the books he hasn't written. Yeah, we can all do that. That's easy. So we have got a topic. We'll get to that in a moment. And I ought to mention, because I'm mentioning it on all of my streams, which might get a bit boring for some of you who are not in the UK or parts of it. But I've got my Union flag pin on today. It just in sort of honour of our dearly departed Queen. Now I'm not a particular royalist, but I'm not an anti-royalist either. This dear old dear is 96 and had served our country well for a long time. So we are mourning her passing a little bit in the UK. It's a bit strange. I don't know if this resonates with other countries all that well, because of course we have a very weird sort of royalty here in the UK. It's called a constitutional monarchy, whereby actually it doesn't really mean a great deal on one level, because the Queen or the King, as it is now of England, of the UK, doesn't actually have any real power. We can't actually kind of do anything. She can't declare war on anything. She can't override Parliament and things like that. I mean, technically she can, but she never would, and they never have. So it's a weird sort of thing. But we've just been so used to having a Queen for the last 50 years. 70 years. It's all a bit of a weird readjustment, the fact that we haven't got a Queen anymore. We're going to have to change the national anthem, and we're going to have to reprint banknotes, and we're going to have to reprint stamps and coins and all sorts of stuff. It's going to be very, very confusing for us poor Brits for a few years, I think, while we adjust. So so we're in the midst of a sort of an outpouring of collective sort of sadness and sorrow and remembrance, I suppose. Which seems appropriate for our dear old Queen. I think the whole monarchy question is a bit of a polarising thing for a lot of people. I'm like most things, to be honest. I'm kind of I can take it or leave it. But I have a lot of respect. The reason I have a lot of respect for the Queen really is mostly down to the fact that when she was very, very young, she basically said, "Well, I'm going to do it this way." And she stuck with that for 70 years. She hasn't interfered with politics. She hasn't voiced her opinions on things, and she must have some, because we've had some appalling politicians in those years. But she's tried to do her best, I feel, to kind of guide her family through an ever-changing world, and she's had some pretty horrendous issues with her family as well, as which other families do. So she's been very steadfast, very. Solid and comforting, and kind of a rock upon which the UK was built, all that sort of stuff, all the polemics. So it's a bit of a shock, actually. It's a bit of a shock that we've lost the Queen. She felt like one of those kind of immortal figures, and she isn't there anymore. It is a bit weird. Chris says, we also have a constitutional monarchy in Sweden. The King is not anywhere near as respected as Queen Elizabeth the second. I suppose Europe is now full of constitutionalised monarchies, because they weren't, and then they are now. So it's not really that weird. We treat celebrities as if they were royals here in America. The United Kingdom just does it formally, and we've got this hereditary chain. Yeah, so I mean, Mad Monks, you're quite right. I mean, you can't get away from it at the moment. Oddly enough, my desktop background, I'll show it to you briefly. Look, my desktop background has updated itself rather curiously, really, is what I've got at the moment. And this is Bing's wallpaper, it just does it automatically. It's like a slightly curious picture to my way of thinking, but given it's the Queen Elizabeth II who's died here, well, the desktop wallpaper has changed to a picture of the Statue of Liberty and a whole bunch of American flags flying at half-mast. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or whether that's to do with 9/11. I'm not quite sure what it is. So yeah, because obviously, the 9/11 was yesterday, and anyway. It's funny how it's all connected. So I was like, why was there a bunch of American flags on my screen? And then suddenly realised it was 9/11. And I thought, it's got nothing to do with the UK at all. There we go. It's because I'm using an American piece of software on my computer. But yeah, so Queen Elizabeth had a lot of respect, and I had a lot of respect for her as an individual. I don't, it makes no logical sense to me that, the fact you're born the son or daughter of somebody who's in power before gives you a right to be anything. But hey, on the other hand, Paddington Bear and James Bond, absolutely brilliant. So as usual on most of these things, I'm a bit of a hypocrite. But there we are. And the Queen might have had more influence behind the scenes, we know. I mean, she definitely had opinions, as occasionally has leaked out over the years. So I don't know whether, but I don't know if the American flags are 9/11 or whether they're to the Queen or whether they're both. But there we are. I mean, some people have said, and it's quite hard to argue with this. Is basically the only reason that the royal, kings and queens are kings and queens is because their ancestors basically bullied everybody else into submission hundreds of years ago, and then just assumed power. Windermere prefers kings being selected by a watery tart throwing a sword at them. How do you know he's a king? Dear. So I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense, but it's so entwined in the culture and stuff. I suppose that's the difficulty of unwinding all that sort of stuff. And, cleverer people than me would have to do that. Glenn, so here's a perspective from the US. Glenn says she was a great representative of the UK, admired around the world. Yes, she inherited, but she made it her own and worked hard at her commitment. I think that's the key thing. I mean, she didn't abuse her power. I think she was, a steadying influence. So there we go. I don't know. It's a curious thing. On one hand, I'm completely with the Republicans going, it shouldn't be allowed. It's stupid. What a complete waste of resources. What makes her any more beneficial than the rest of us? And there's no logical answer to that one. On the other side, it's like, hey, go Britain. Let's have some more pomp and circumstances. And it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm, as I've said on this stream before, I'm not a very strong nationalist at all. I don't get patriotism. It's not something I really understand. And yet there's a strange bit. If you fly a bunch of Spitfires or Concorde, wave some flags, and play Rule Britannia on the airwaves as they all go past, there is a bit of me that goes yes, because I'm British, for no logical reason at all. But there we go. So I kind of get it and I kind of don't. It's strange. Mad Monks has got the quote. Listen, some strange woman lying in bonds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate for the masses, not some farcical aquatic ceremony. Dear. I think Charles III, which is weird because of course Charles I and Charles II came to slightly stickier ends. Hopefully Charles III will avoid those, but yes, he's going to find it hard not to say things, isn't he? That's going to be. But anyway, that's enough. Otherwise, I'm going to put people off the stream. That's enough about the royal family, because if you want to watch anything about the royal family, it's been covered in great depth virtually everywhere else on the internet. So we will move on from there. Now, Charles could have selected his other names. He could have done, but that would just be weird, I think. It was a royal waffle. It was a royal waffle. It was a corgi waffle. So anyway, yes, onwards. So tonight's topic, slightly serious topic actually, a slightly serious topic. So to kind of round off my series on things you need to know as a writer and stuff that's probably worth discussing and having a chat about, is the topic of mental health. Okay, now this is a bit of a this seems like a really touchy chat to hop into. Infamously music. It's not really. No, we're very light-hearted here. Infamously music. That's a really good username, but it's really hard to say. So I'm just going to call you Infamous for the moment. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, when it's because it's happened. Okay, and I've got my union flag up. Yeah, for the moment. But no, we don't take it too seriously on this stream. So if you're a Republican or if you're a royalist, I don't really mind. I can understand all of your viewpoints. I'm just sort of muddling through the middle, really. But anyway, that's enough of that. We're moving on. We're moving on to the topic of the evening, which is mental health for writing. Now, this is actually a potentially slightly serious topic, which is not something that we normally do either. But the reason I wanted to cover it is because it is quite important. Because actually being a writer, in fact, actually being any kind of creative person at all, I think probably predisposes you to be a little bit vulnerable to having mental health problems, which you could probably tell, right? The reason being, I think creative people are. I mean, let's be completely 100% honest here. Okay, we're creative people. We are a bit odd, right? We are all collectively a little bit unhinged. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a creative person in the first place. Because creative people see things in different ways. I mean, let's just take writing. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're making stuff up, right? So making stuff up for no good reason other than we feel we need to. Writing it down, hoping to get it turned into a book that some other people will read. We're prepared to spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours doing this, agonising over words, spending ridiculous amounts of energy and effort to create this thing, with the minuscule chance that we're going to make any money out of it. It doesn't make any logical sense to be a writer at all. Okay, and yet we still do it. And lots and lots of other creative types, artists, musicians, painters, poets, anybody who creates something artistic, carvers, choose your artistic area, will spend an awfully long time making art because, and there's not really an answer to that question other than because. I mean, how many of you? I mean, I get this with writing. Is I've just got to write something. I've got to tell this story. There's something inside my mind, my psyche, my essence. I don't know. I don't want to use the word soul because that gets all sort of metaphysical. That doesn't want to rest. It wants to create. It has to create to be satisfied. And Glenn's making the point there. You do it for the joy and the personal purpose of enjoying creating it. So there is a weird thing in us that is only satisfied when we're doing creative stuff. And I've had long conversations with people who aren't creative. And there's an awful lot more people like that than there are creative people. I mean, creative people will, consolidate around different events, and you'll meet lots of other like-minded people at places like that, which is good, which is kind of part of what this stream is about as well. But it's something that drives you as a creative person. Okay, now I don't know what that thing is, but creative people have it and other people don't. Okay. And they look at you in a kind of weird sort of a way when you're kind of going, what about the thing? I remember having conversations with a few people at work years and years and years ago, and it was one of those, those it wasn't Myers-Briggs, but it was that sort of personality analysis stuff, and I don't know how well those things work, but yeah, we were doing. It wasn't Myers-Briggs, but it was something like that. They were analysing us, and basically they put this picture up, and it was sort of one of those pictures that could be anything really. It was kind of a red blurry mess with some sort of shadowy things in it, and some vaguely suggestive shapes. And basically, we had like 30 seconds to write down what we saw, and it could be anything. Just write down what you see. And so I wrote down, it's okay. it's a volcanic Masma. There's some creature from the underworld being imprisoned there, and the majors have managed to lock down this ghastly beast into the volcano, and it's threatening to break free. But that sort of thing. Anyway, so I submitted that. Didn't even think too much about it. I thought, well, that's what I see. And the guy next to me, who was a sales manager or something, we had to swap notes. I swapped notes with him, he swapped notes with me. And I could see him reading my entry, and he was kind of like going, what the hell's this? And I read his entry, and his entry was red. And that's literally all he saw in this image. He didn't see anything else. There was no spark of creativity that just wasn't there. And he said to me after, he says, I completely admire, so I don't understand it. He said, and I've got no inclination of how you even saw that. He said, but I'd love to be able to have an imagination. He says, I haven't got one. I can't imagine anything like that. It's just red as far as I can see. He says, I love watching stuff on television. No way I could dream any kind of story up. And it was quite eye-opening to me that there are loads and loads of people out there who have no imagination at all. Can consume stuff but can't create it, no matter how hard they try. Was he arrogant? No, he was quite chilled. He just said, it's red. What else is there? And it was like, weird. A and B says 30-ish minutes into the stream when we're analysing the spirit of creativity. We are kind of doing that, but I think what comes with that thing. Okay, so I would, and this may be shooting out on all sorts of tangents, because I am not a qualified psychotherapist, or I might be a qualified psychopath, but I'm not a qualified psychotherapist or anything like that. Okay, I'm a complete amateur, so I'm just sort of making stuff up, so feel free to disagree with me. I feel that creative people notice stuff that may or may not be there about the world. I remember at school, for example, always being told off. My teacher's report in primary school would be, Drew would probably be really, really good at this if he wasn't always gazing out the window, daydreaming. He may be quite intelligent, but we'll never know. I've actually got that written down on a report card. Because the world that we create in our imaginings almost seems more real than the real world sometimes, and you try and explain that to people who aren't creative, and they just don't get it. They go, "What do you mean that your imaginary world feels more real than the real world?" Nothing wrong with being a psychopath, Mad Monk's off, there you go. I remember looking out the windows at the clouds going, well, I wonder what's on the other side of that cloud. Maybe there's a castle up there or something as a child. I don't want the scientific explanation of what a cloud is. I want to know, is there a magic castle on the other side of the cloud? There's definitely something weird about the fact that you can manufacture things inside your head. And they take on a life of their own, and they become quite significant to you. I remember when I was writing the Shapewood series of books. So I have 3 main characters in those books, and I was writing at quite intense scenes and quite lots of emotion and sort of things inside of there. I remember I started dreaming about it. And I remember waking up thinking, if I'm starting to dream about this place that I'm creating in my head, maybe I'm getting a bit too intense here. It was weird, because I suppose your brain is spending so much time concentrating on something that it kind of goes there in a weird sort of way. So Stone Cold Mason says, I was like that. I was continuously talking and telling stories in class and getting into trouble. So education. Education is an entire stream in itself, isn't it? I do agree with you, Alan, that education often seems to determine, stifle creativity, because it's so geared to being academically successful. You must be able to parse this English phrase correctly. You must be able to add these numbers up. You must be able to do algebra. You must be able to, conjugate these verbs, etc., 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 whatever the things are. Whereas being able to write a decent story, is that a skill? I mean, it is a skill, but is it a skill that's valued or taught? How many potentially creative people have been stifled into obscurity because of the education? I'd hesitate. That's a terrifying question, isn't it? So a man amongst others used to solve problems in his head even when I was doing something else. My brain. I've had something similar. I've had a plot problem that I've been thinking about and mulling over in my conscious mind. I've gone to bed. It seems like my subconscious continues working on the issue, and sometimes has figured it out by the morning and lets me know when I wake up. And it's kind of like, that's pretty cool. There's some weird things about how our brains work. But the downside is, I think we pick up. I mean, I remember as a youngster being more empathetic with creatures and things than I was with people, which made me wonder if I was a bit odd. If I saw a tree that had fallen down, unexpectedly, or been broken by some sort of event, or storm or damage or something, then I would get pangs of remorse for the tree, much more so than any of the school kids in the that had got broken legs or something because they'd fallen out of said tree. There's lots of little things that, as I think back on it now about how I was as a child and growing up, I had some curious ways of looking at the world. I was convinced as a child that I was special, like most kids are, right? I was I was the only person who saw something in the sunrise, or something in the dew on the grass, or something in the trees that nobody else could perceive, because nobody else talked about it. And it's only as I've got older that I've spoken to other people and realised that is the inner creative voice, sort of just doing what it does. I could have been well, I mean, I was I grew up in the 70s, so before things like ADHD and dyslexia. I mean, they kind of were beginning to be talked about, but way earlier than any kind of diagnosis. I'm pretty sure I'm actually mildly dyslexic, which sounds weird for a writer, but I think I've got something. I'm definitely slightly autistic as well. So all those sort of labels, I'm definitely on one of those sort of spectrum kind of areas. Just because I'm very, very, my wife will tell me off. She'll be talking at me, and then she'll say something, and I won't notice, and she'll say, "Are you listening to me?" To which I usually respond, "But that's a very strange way to start a conversation." Which doesn't go down very well. Don't do that one. Okay, that doesn't go down well. No, in jest. But I can get very, very easily lost in my own thoughts, and I was lost in my own head. Sometimes mid-conversation, which is actually very, very rude, and I wouldn't recommend it. But it's part of being a creative person sometimes. Just selective hearing. Maybe it is. I've usually suddenly wandered off on a tangent because somebody said something, it's triggered something, and I've started thinking about the thing, and I've lost focus on whatever I'm supposed to be doing. And that happens to be a lot. It's just part of my makeup. That's the introvert in me. Yeah, I suppose it is. And there is, there's a lot to be said for introvertism. As well in that regard. But I do think all these sort of things, the fact that we tend to have this little narrative voice going around in our head that is meaningful to us, is sometimes dangerous, because I think it can alienate you from people because they don't get you. They think you're odd. I mean, I was quite lonely as a kid because I didn't meet any other creative people, I suppose, really, until I went to university. That was the first time I met other people who vaguely had some inkling of what I was talking about. So at school, people were either academic or they were sort of sporty types, or they were bullies. Those were the three categories of people I encountered. So I didn't find anybody else. I didn't find any soulmates at school in that regard. So it took a while for me to start thinking. Actually, no, there are other people like me out in the world, which was weird. So being a creative person can be quite isolating, because it can be a case that nobody gets what you're talking about, and you are just left with a conclusion that you're a bit weird, and a bit of an outcast, which, depending on where you are and how resilient you are, is potentially a problem. So I think that's an occupational hazard for being a creative person, is that you may find yourself on your own, and you also may find yourself ostracized because of the way you think and the way you view things, and the priorities that you have in the sort of things that you'd like to do. So I think that's the thing. So I have the movie narrative voice in my head. So yeah, I mean, I do that as well when I'm reading a book. I start voicing the characters, which is a bit weird. So that's the thing. I think the other thing, of course, is the whole process of writing. Now, depending on how you like to do your writing, I like to have peace and quiet, you see. So I don't like having any music playing. I don't like having any noise. I don't like having any distractions. I like to close the door and get typing. Now, that's not very sociable, right? So you can't do that all the time. It leads to being quite solitary. So the actual process of writing, I mean, you have to spend, to write a book, let's say it's 70,000 words upwards, right? That's a lot of text to type into a thing, whether it's a phone or a computer or a typewriter or whatever you're using. It's quite an isolating affair. You can't really do that together. It's just quite an antisocial thing. So you have to be pretty comfortable with your own company, and you have to be in an environment where that's possible. And you also have to be, if there are other people involved with you in your life, they have to kind of understand that okay, he's writing, leave him alone, and you have to come back out of that environment every so often, to eat and things like that, but also to be sociable too. So there's things like that in there as well. And the process of writing, I think if you are starting out with writing as well, Monksoft doesn't like his own company. See, I like my own company. It's the sort of thing that you don't say when you're married. I'm quite happy on my own, thank you very much, which is not what you should say, is it? I love my wife very much, and I like spending time with her. But I'm equally happy being on my own. It's not like I'm pining for things when she's not there, and she's got lots of stuff that she likes to do as well that I'm not doing, and that's fine. But and we're quite old now. We've been married for a long time, and we put up with each other's weirdness and wackiness. Well, she puts up with my weirdness and wackiness. She hasn't got very much weirdness and wackiness because she's obviously perfect. But you acclimatise to each other. Now, when you're starting out, that's not necessarily quite the same, flexibility, shall we say, that you've got in your relationship. So, doing that sort of stuff is also tricky, I think. And the fact, if you put any kind of pressure into that situation, i.e. the pressure to make some money, or the pressure to hit a deadline, or the pressure to, why aren't you doing a proper job, all those sorts of things, that can be very, very stressful, which isn't good for creativity in the first place. There's the voices that that cry out to us from our kind of mental kind of state. What's nowadays called kind of imposter syndrome, where you're part of your brain is basically saying you're not good at this. You're rubbish. You're kidding yourself that you can be a writer. This is pathetic. You can't write for toffee. This is never going to amount to anything. You are wasting your time. Go out and do something more useful instead. And those voices are sometimes easy to basically dismiss, but sometimes they're not. If you're in a more vulnerable position, for whatever reason, your health isn't quite where it should be, or your whatever the circumstances are, those voices can become quite thunderous and difficult to manage. There's some guy who looks like me who says that to me regularly. Yeah. What if the voice in your head says you're great? Well, that's clearly wrong as well. So yeah, I mean, Chris, that's a good question. Yeah, because I've for the last 25 30 years, almost never been able to fully believe that someone was honest when they come with me. Yeah, I mean, it can be very difficult to trust people. I think that's, it is very difficult. What's people's motivations for saying things? If you're always double guessing what people's motivations are for the things that they say, that's pretty exhausting as well. And to get honest feedback on things, and as a danger, how do you calibrate that? How do you calibrate what is a genuine compliment, what isn't a genuine compliment, from somebody who's trying to influence you or win you over or divert you, or is it just a genuine compliment? The only way, really, I suppose, over that is a bit of experience. You can usually get a sense if someone's sort of blowing smoke up your nostrils, as it were. But it's hard. There's a level of self-confidence in there, and the only way to calibrate it really is, okay, we'll have, I mean, from my perspective, if enough people have basically said yes, that's it, you did a good thing there. If I'm getting 80% people saying that and 20% people going, nah, it's rubbish, then I'm going to go with the balance of probability. But that's quite logical. It can take only a small piece of bad news to undo an awful lot of good news, or a bad expression of opinion to undo an awful lot of good expressions of opinion. And that's because we tend to focus in on the negative. And so we've got to kind of read our own biases into that. And I think that's part of the thing. Is as creative people, it's very hard for us to take an objective view of what we're doing, because it's not an objective thing. It's a very subjective subject, writing and doing writing stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably agree with Blue Ganymede there. It does sound like you're being hard on yourself. So we're going to give you... We think you're a good guy, Chris, okay? And that is a genuine compliment. There you go. And Mad Monk Soft, you're brilliant as well, okay? Every week you go on here, getting the Wikipedia quotes for us. Couldn't do without you. So there you go. You're awesome. And the rest of you on the stream are awesome as well. Most of the time. Sometimes you're quite annoying, but hey, most of the time you're okay. Is that okay? But it is hard to take compliments. It is hard to take compliments because we're sort of programmed to sort of be... I mean, particularly if you're British. I mean, the British are terrible at this. But I see a lot of other countries have problems with it as well. You compliment somebody and it's kind of, yeah, no, you don't just say that. No. Oh yeah, well, it was okay. I mean, the classic British expression, not bad. That's actually, for those of you who don't know, if you're in other cultures apart from the UK, is actually probably the highest compliment you can pay a British person. It's basically to say to them, yeah, not bad. That's basically, it was awesome. And I must admit, I've been to, and I know, this is generalising hugely badly, but I've been to places in America, particularly. I must admit, I noticed it most when I was in California. Now, I don't know if Glenn could probably tell me more about this, but everything was awesome. I know that's a Lego song, but everything was genuinely awesome pretty much all of the time. I was like, it can't be this good, Oh, that's awesome. So, well, no, it's not. It's all right, No, that's awesome. No, it's not. It's kind of... It's kind of okay. It's pretty average, really. But no, it's awesome. Oh man, that's awesome. It's just so enthusiastic, and it's like got very tired after a while because there was nothing between awesome and anything else. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Yeah, everything being awesome. It's gnarly, dudes. It's Glenn. And radical. It's like we're going back in time. Whereas in the UK, it's the other way around. Yeah, not bad is about as good as you're going to get. And not bad is actually probably one of our highest compliments. So, West Coast, bro, it's awesome, man. Yeah, so yeah, that's a cultural thing across the world, is how to pay compliments. And our response to that, this is the thing with creative people. Okay, so if you're creative, you're driven by some inner urge. Now, you'd have to go deeper psychology to understand exactly what that urge is. Is that urge to be remembered? Is that urge to make a difference to society? Is that urge to being driven by combination of different things? What is the urge that drives us to be creative? Now that's the deep thing. But if you create something, whether it's a book or a painting or anything creative, and put it out into the public space in whatever fashion that is, whether it's publishing on Amazon or putting it in an art gallery or whatever it happens to be, you are opening yourself up to public perception. Okay, now public perception can be pretty darn cruel. All right, that's why when I'm asked now as dare I say it, relatively seasoned author, when somebody sends me, and I do still occasionally do this, and I'm happy to, because I think I've learned a lot through the process of having my own work critiqued. It's only fair that I should pass that on to other people, and I will critique other writers' work if they want me to when it's early days, particularly when they're starting out. And of course, it would be very easy for me to take an initial novel from a first-time writer and rip it to shreds, right? And we've done that on the stream for fun, right? In a nice way. But it'd be very, very easy for me to rip any first novel to pieces, okay? Because I've got a lot of experience. But I know that wouldn't necessarily be a constructive experience for the person at the other end. Even though it's true and it's correct, it's not helpful to them, right? What they need is some criticism, sort of mixed in with lots of encouragement as well. So there's enough stuff for them to get stuck into to improve by a certain amount, but not so much that they get overwhelmed by it and go, I can't do this. I'll never be able to to be as good as Drew. No, because that's not something you should be aiming at. If the moment you put a thing into the public space, there is a danger you're going to meet critical people who don't give a damn about your well-being. Okay, now I do give a damn about people's well-being, and so when I'm criticising something, I'm very mindful of, okay, well, who's at the other end of this, and what might they do with the criticism? So if I'm faced with a relatively new author who's sent me a book, then I'm going to go into it correctly and then make suggestions, but make sure I couch those suggestions in a way that I feel is encouraging, rather than this is pathetic. Call yourself an author, you haven't got a chance, sonny. That's not the way to do it. But the public may or may not share that, and it's very easy to put something out there and basically have it trashed by the great wide world. And there is that danger. There is that danger that if you put something out there, then people may hate it, and you face that all the sort of time. So there we go. Glenn says, when I told someone I work with about my stories being in Nitrogen Conscious, the response I got was, way to put yourself out there. And I'm not sure how to take that one. I'm not sure if you didn't read. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'll get some really weird kind of things. I mean, I've had them, well, why are you doing that? Why are you writing a book? It's like, where do you think books come from? It's strange. So Chris says there are very few people who I know well enough that I'll take compliments at face value. My family is generally not included with that group. Family is a tricky conversation. You probably can't go to family either. That's a hard one. Families don't usually are not the best critiques. Either they will be horrendously negative or they'll be horrendously positive. Neither of which are very, very useful in terms of critique. So they'll want to support you generally. The book was nice, dear. Yeah, exactly. It's not useful, is it? Ian Famous says the convo is interesting to me from the perspective of someone who's not terribly good at writing story writing, but I write mods from a game mechanic creation perspective. So that's still a creative thing. So we're being quite generic about creative stuff here. Anything that requires some thought process, some artistry in the construction thereof, I think counts in this conversation. I think there's a danger in those things, that you put your stuff out there and somebody doesn't like it, whether it's a piece of computer code, whether it's a story, whether it's an artwork. Somebody says, "Nah, that's rubbish," and it's just easy to do that. Okay, you can spend out. I mean, and they've got no concept of the amount of effort that's been put into that thing. It's very, very easy to dismiss. The hours and hours and hours of work and craft and thought and blood, sweat and tears, etc. has gone into making a thing for someone to go, "Nah, that's rubbish," and it's obliterated in like 2 seconds. The one that always gets me is when somebody, they do it at conventions a lot. They pick up your book and they turn it around and do all that sort of stuff. We talked about that before as well. And they go and look at the back and they look at the cost and they go, £10? £10? That's really expensive. And you go, well, yeah, okay, so you could, for the same amount of money, you could have 2 Starbucks coffees, maybe a pint and a half of beer, both of which would last you like about 15 to 20 minutes, tops, okay? This book, if you read it, and you can read, I assume, I don't say that, but we'll give you entertainment for like 20 hours, yeah, so it's cheap, really. People have a funny conception of the value of things, and they think £10 for a book is expensive, but they're happy to blow £5 on the coffee. A pint and a half of beer for £10, yes. Who took one? So I haven't bought a pint of beer for a while, actually. So there we go. And Alan says, I've always found my wife to be a thoughtful critic. My wife is actually very good at critic. Actually, my wife is a plot hole spotter extraordinaire. So it can be the case. But as a general rule of thumb, family isn't necessarily the best place to go for criticism. I should one. There's no right or wrong with art. It's very personal. This is very true. This is very true. And the trick is to sort of find your space where your sort of thing is appreciated. I think that's part of it as well. Stone Cold Mason says, do you think many critics are made up of those who don't have a creative mind themselves? I don't know. I think that's a tough one. I mean, I would say probably not. In my experience, the people who've been most critical of my stuff are actually other creative people who either think, or at least seem to think, and I'm putting motivations in their head, they seem to think either they could have done it better or I didn't do it well enough, or, well, yeah, it's true, he just got lucky at doing that thing. He's not as good as he sounds, kind of thing. It seems to be creative people who actually are the worst offenders here, right? Because other people go, if they're interested in something, they'll just sort of consume it. Yeah, I quite like that. No, I don't like that. Whereas actually making kind of value judgments on creative stuff, I find personally tends to be creative people who make those value judgments. So there we go. So I don't know. That's my experience. Drew's sales pitch. You can't read, can you? This is an interesting device. It's called a book. Now let me tell you how it works. It's £3.50 a pint. Yeah, I was going to say, a tenner can get you a couple of pints of beer, surely. One would hope. Depends on the type of how decent your beer is, but there we go. Chris says, why are you writing a book? I ask myself that often enough. I spent about a year now on my current project, and it finally feels like the wheels begin to properly turn. And it, you know, like I said, a lot of effort goes into creating something like that. JR9 in here, a few book trailer done, uploaded, sent out on my newsletter post on Twitter. What a palaver. Yep, keep going. So all that promotional activity. Infamous says, interesting, I find creative people who make similar things to what you make. I'll show a mod to make someone unfamiliar with the game and they have a much more useful opinion on whether they are creative or not. Yeah, so that's it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it varies. It varies. I don't think there's an easy answer to that one. So it's difficult. You know, as to where that stuff comes. I don't think you can peg it down very easily. You know, what you've got to be as a writer, I think, is you've got to be prepared for criticism, some of it unjustified, or just dismissive opinions, or just plain hostility. Because you can't always tell what your creative work is going to bring out of other people, and sometimes that isn't necessarily going to be pleasant. So if somebody starts to, you know, be nasty about the creative stuff that you've done, you know, as long as it's not, I suppose, abusive, you know, I think you can take steps to deal with it if it gets to that stage. But if it's just generally kind of dismissive or kind of, nah, it's rubbish kind of response, you've just got to sort of acknowledge that and go, well, that person didn't get what I was trying to talk about, and move on. You've got to not let it kind of get to you. It's the same with reviews. I mean, writers are terrible. You know, we get a positive review, yay! Get a positive review, yay! Get a positive review, yay! Get a negative review. What the hell do they think they're talking about? What do you mean it's a negative review? Just justify your 1 star. What do you mean it's yeah. And the amount of energy that can be expended on trying to cut down, you know, and justify your existence when you've got a 1 star review. And sometimes even those 1 star reviews happen unfairly. I've got a 1 star review, one of my books, I can't remember which one, basically says Amazon delivery turned up late, 1 star. That's not the fault of the author. What do you expect me to do? Personally hand deliver it to you? Did you read the book? No, it turned up late, so I'm not going to read it. What are you trying to say in this review? But it's annoying because, of course, it drags your entire average down. So one of my books is now 4.8 stars rather than 5 because some idiot posted a 1 star review because the book turned up late. I've got no idea whether they liked the book or not. So, you know, so all those sort of things. It's a hostile environment, and I think there's lots of things that are up against you. I mean, we've talked a lot about the fact that you know, you're in a sea of thousands and thousands of other people trying to do the same thing. So it's like, how am I ever going to get recognised as a writer? It takes a heck of a long time to write a book. Okay, it's not an easy thing to do. Interesting enough, if you look on some of the you know, kind of, I suppose, disaffected surveys of professional working people, you know, what would you rather be doing than being at work? And lots and lots and lots of them put, I am going to be a writer. And it feels like all these people who are like looking at their jobs going, I don't like doing this job, I want to be a writer. Yeah, have this sort of vision of writing being, you know, you've got this beautiful little cottage, and you know there's a nice window, and there's a nice meadow outside. It's always sunny. Some mountains in the background, maybe a stream just, you know, tickling by with a nice sort of lapping water effect. You know, there's constant tea and biscuits coming to you every 30 seconds, and you're typing there, and everything's wonderful, and you're writing it. And the moment you finish it, you just press a button, and then somebody rings you up and says, I'm going to give you £1 million for your book. And then I'm like, okay, I'll just go and write another one then. And then people seem to have this view of writing that there's this idyllic environment. It just isn't. Okay. You know, so most people have got not even the faintest conception of what it's like to write a book, how much hard work it actually is. And I'm assuming most other creative professions are pretty similar. I've got a friend, Jason, who's been on the stream before, who's talked about the struggles he faced as a professional musician and how that went up and down and up and down, and soul destroying stories in some cases, of how hard it is. Even if you've got lots and lots of talent and are prepared to put in the hard work, sometimes it just doesn't work out. It can be pretty soul destroying. And if something goes wrong and you put 2 years of your life into a thing and it crashes and burns, then that's going to have an impact on you, right? You can't avoid that. How do you cope with that? How do you reconcile yourself to that that period of your life? You've got to go into these things with realistic expectations and sort of expectation management and all those kind of things. Written by and hand delivered by Drew Wago, of course. I mean, every single book for you guys I will come and deliver personally. Absolutely, in a little gold envelope. Absolutely fine. Chris Fucker says, not my fault, the Mobilist broke down and we had to spend days repairing it. Yeah. People will critique things, yeah. And I've had criticism. One of my and this makes my wife and I chuckle because it's the first book I wrote, actually, Torn, which does desperately need an edit, and I really ought to get around to doing that again. But there's a piece in it where there's a particular scene where a father says this phrase to his daughter, and I got a review basically saying it's totally unrealistic. No father would ever say that to their daughter. To which my wife and I kind of looked at each other and sort of chuckled. How are we going to tell him, whoever this reviewer was? Because it was actually a scene from real life that my wife kindly gave me permission to use in the book. And it's like, no, totally unrealistic, but it happened. It's actually a real thing. So there we go. So I don't know. It's weird. It is weird. Suddenly I'm regretting getting the audiobooks. And we have it on video now. It's there. It's there for all to see. And sometimes the more real things are the more people think it's like. I mean, reality is very weird, and it doesn't often make sense. I think I'm more of a frustrated person smashing his head against the typewriter. I know my mind's a bit old-fashioned. Yeah, the old typewriter stuff. But it's a lot of work. Okay, and anything that takes a lot of work is going to be tiring. Okay, and I think you can wear yourself out doing writing. I mean, I've certainly been in situations over the last few years where, I mean, COVID was a disaster for writing from my perspective. You kind of think, well, hang on, why was it a disaster? Because you suddenly got loads of time on your hands, and I did, but I didn't, because the problem was because everybody was at home, bouncing around the house. I couldn't write at all. There was just too much noise, too much distraction, which I found really frustrating and annoying. And so, naturally I was grumpy and horrible, clearly. Stuff goes wrong. Okay, so it can be very, very stressful if the environment that you need isn't there anymore. And you can get tired out. So if you write too much and you work too hard, you burn yourself out. And that comes with all sorts of other stresses and strains as well, as to how do you recover from that. You've got to stop writing for a bit and rest, relax, and do other things. And we're not necessarily all that good at that, because then you get into that whole guilt thing. When I'm tired, so I'm going to relax. Oh yeah, but you're relaxing. You're not doing anything. You're not being productive. So that's bad, right? Yeah, it's bad. So I should be doing something. No, you shouldn't, because you should be relaxing. Yeah, but if I don't do anything, then I'm not being productive. You kind of get into this crazy cycle of kind of, I'm not allowed to rest, but I am. I'm not. All those sort of things. Those are occupational hazards to watch. So I've tended now, I mean, turning this into sort of note of practicality. What I tend to do with my writing nowadays is I tend to write in the morning up until about lunchtime, And then I kind of basically say, right, I'm not going to I'm not going to be creative anymore, unless something particular is going on. I really just want to finish it. I basically give myself a break nowadays, and basically say from lunchtime onwards, I'll do more admin-y stuff. Organising things or fixing that, or just working through a to-do list. Because I find that if I try and be creative for the entire day, I just get exhausted really, really quickly, and I can't keep it up. So I can be creative in the morning, with provision of appropriate amounts of coffee and stuff. But you can't do it all the time. You've got to find the amount of creativity you can generate, and I think that also changes as you get older. As your mental stamina for things that isn't just the same as it was years and years ago. So there are a lot of things in there that if you don't manage them, they can negatively impact you. I'm only creative between the hours of 11 and 12 on every third Tuesday. It's very precise, Mad Monks. So, and then Glenn, I mean, I agree. I felt like I should have had a lot of writing credit over the last 2 years, but working and playing at the desk was a chore. Yeah, so if you're stuck at a computer, there's a billion one things you can be doing other than writing at a computer. This is the problem with computers. There's social media, and there's updating the website, and then there's subscribing to this thing, and there's someone's posted a cat meme. Got to check that out. That's really important. And then you wasted 45 minutes and you've got nothing to show for it, and then you feel guilty because you've been procrastinating. And and squirrel tendencies. You're quite right, man. Look at that thing. I'm very, very bad at that. I've got to be quite disciplined with myself to hit a word count every day, and I find that works for me. I basically say you can't have another coffee until you've written another 1,000 words. And you've got to have a realistic, you've got to have a realistic appraisal of the whole writing process. Sometimes you just need to get on and do some writing, right? Sometimes you need to do promotional stuff, and that's okay. You just need to make sure that you're being honest with yourself about the amount of time that you're spending on it. Shutting off the internet. Now that sometimes is a good thing. I mean, I have a rule with myself that I only have the browser window open for research purposes when I'm writing, and I will not go to Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or anything else. Most of the time I can get where that works. I usually allow myself one tweet before breakfast, so you probably noticed that I quite often just stick something stupid on my Twitter early in the morning, after the first sort of coffee's cut in, and then I don't generally do Twitter until maybe about lunchtime, and then I do some stupid stuff in the afternoon. That's just just to try and make sure the creative stuff is actually focused on generating some actual work, and stuff like that comes with a bit of experience. Is like you know your weaknesses, because I could sit on Twitter all day and make up stupid stuff, and create nothing. There is a danger of getting sucked into the research, of course. That's very true. As long as the research doesn't involve tractors. I've got a friend who lives locally who's been researching a book for several years now. And every time I see him, I basically say, "How's the book going?" "Oh yeah, it's progressing well." "Yeah, have you actually written anything?" No. It's like I think he's just enjoying the research. That's basically what it is. So I think there's a danger there as well. 2013, Makeout Hill. Hello, Drew 07. Hello, 07 to you. Thanks for popping into the stream. So what are some general tips to... It's a good, very, 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 very good question. What are some general tips to stay focused on your work in general? That's going to depend on the individual. In my experience, I set myself a daily word count. Now that may be too officious and too draconian for some of you. You can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it monthly. I like a daily one because it just keeps me focused. I do little reward things, basically. So I can't have another cup of coffee until I've hit a certain word count. So quite often my word counts. I'm just looking at my current novel. Where have I got to? I got to a point where I could earn another coffee. What was it? earlier on this week. I was doing it. 76,000 words. There we go. Okay, that was like coffee, yay! That works for me. Little rewards, and I have a kind of a timeline for it. Word count I find quite a good motivator because I like the numericalness of it. But some people have reported they will switch off the internet. They will switch off their phones. They will be quite draconian with themselves, basically, so they can't go and check Twitter and things like that because otherwise they'll get distracted. The other thing that I have, when my family know I'm writing, they don't disturb me. So basically I have a rule that if my door is open, you can come in and chat. If my door is closed, you can't. Okay, and I try not to abuse that for too long, right? The tendency is to leave them closed all day because I'm an introvert. No, but I will keep it closed for sort of 2-hour stints. And basically, if the door is closed, don't come in. But you need to work that through with your family or your significant others, depending on your situation. So that's another one. Lots of writers have little things that they do which get them in the zone. A lot of writers report things like what they will do is they will do a tiny bit of editing of the previous day's work to get them back into right now, therefore I will now write on from where I was. So the little process of doing a tiny bit of editing at the end of last session gets them back into the zone of writing some new stuff, which I find does work quite well for me too. So that's the thing. For others, it's right, must have this piece of music on. The moment I hear that piece of music, my brain switches into writing mode, blah, blah, blah. It's going to depend. All of those are quite useful. They may work for you, they may not, depending on where you are. So Glenn says, I used to get more writing done just in an hour at a time for a run. Sometimes the pressure of, I've only got this little space of time in the day to do something actually is more conducive to writing. That can be the case. I've noticed that. So I used to write a lot on the train, and I found that was quite good because it was dead time that I couldn't do anything else with, so I might as well do some writing. Sometimes a bit of pressure to make use of a obscure bit of time that you otherwise would waste can work. So there we go. Hope that's useful. Very enlightening answer. Well done. I've been enlightening. Excellent. So those sort of things are there. And so the key thing is not to over pressurize yourself. Now, I personally can push out a book a year at the moment, given everything else that I'm doing. Now, that's neither fast nor slow, really. It's probably slower than average, but my books are relatively long and probably quite complicated compared to some. Some people can knock out a book in 3 months, beginning to end. They just go, they just plough on, that's job done. Some people take years to write a book. None of those are wrong, none of those are right. You need to find your own pace and what works for you. That depends a little bit on what you're trying to achieve and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But comparing yourself to other people is never a good idea. I mean, swap ideas with them, but don't basically go, oh, well, so-and-so did it in 6 months, therefore I must do it in 5.5 weeks. That's not a helpful thing either. It's not really a competition. So don't view it as a competition. The same thing goes to selling your book, and advertising it. It may feel like a competition because there's people selling books all around you, but it isn't really a competition because they will sell books regardless of what you do, and you will sell books regardless of what they do. It's not like there's a finite number of people out there who will only buy a certain number of books. Okay, people will buy things because they like them or they're interested in them, and that's regardless. There isn't a finite number of books that get bought each year, and that's you've got to grab a certain quota of that, and that's your quota. That's not how it works. So don't feel you're in competition with other writers for a limited number of sales. That's probably not a healthy way of looking at it either. So what I'm saying is that you haven't done a Brandon Sanderson and written 5 sequel novels. No, I can't do that. I sit down. Suppose I sit down and I agonise over things that I probably don't need to agonise about. For example, today I've been trimming today my current novel because I wasn't happy with how some of the politics worked out. And I've done this before, and I've shown this to people afterwards. I've shown them the pre-version and the post-version, and somebody said, "I wouldn't have noticed that." I'm like, "I spent 3 weeks on that." But if it's not satisfying to me, it's not correct. So that's my rationale. I want it to be how I want it to be, and that's the that's the overview of the creative person. It's got to be right, otherwise I'm not going to let it finished. So that's difficult. Chris Viking says, I have a few documents, I really need to combine them, called sources and links to useful and informative pages on the internet. So yeah, I mean, how you do your research is another topic, isn't it? I tend to do quite a lot of it up front and then go into specifics when I need them. That's just how I tend to do it. Glenn says, I think I just like to play too much with it. On the other hand, I find it hard to go some ideas and nail down, this is what I will do. Yeah, so I mean, I've got situations where I've written a scene and gone, this is really good, I like this scene, but I can't use it because that's not where the story goes. The important thing is, my technique there is just to have a not used file, and I've got a not used file for my current book. I'll just show you how big it is. So my first draft is at 76,000 words, and at the moment my stuff that I've written that I definitely won't be using is 1,550 words. So it's not huge, but there's some stuff there. So 1,550 words I've written that I'm not going to use because it's wrong. Okay, don't delete your not used file though. Keep it, because you never know when it might become useful for something else. So things like that. So it is about techniques. There's no right or wrong about it. And I think the other thing, going back to the mental health thing, is comparing yourself to somebody else, either in terms of sales success or number of copies of books sold, or they've got an agent and I've just signed a publishing deal for this, that, and the other. On one hand, don't compare yourself to them because they're at a different place to where you are. You don't really know where they are in reality in their writing kind of life. So that's one thing. Comparing yourself to other people is never a good idea anyway, I find, because you don't know enough about them. And there's always, you've got to be very, very careful with social media, because I know an awful lot of people on social media, and I've met quite a few of them in real life, and the two don't marry up at all. I mean, there's that classic old meme, isn't it? May your life be as awesome as you claim it is on social media. Or you get the opposite type of person who basically everything is desperately bad on social media, and actually their life is okay. Social media is not the truth, right? It's not the truth. So I'm not saying people are deliberately lying, but they will be probably emphasising things to a degree. I think we all do it. We can't probably help it. So be wary of that, and don't compare yourself to other people. You're doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. How many pages would 76,000 words be? I've no idea. I can't even really take a guess at that. Probably 200 odd, something like that. 220 in an average book, something like that. I have some really shocking rubbish in my content, but that's the point. That's your first draft is rubbish. It just is. Okay, don't worry about that. Chris has got a sudden flurry of inspiration and wrote down an actual guide. Well done. Accept that it's normal to have fits and starts of creativity. Creativity isn't something you switch on and off like a tap. You may have days, or even a sequence of days, where you get hardly anything done at all because it just doesn't want to go. The creativity isn't there because you're maybe a bit under the weather, or you're tired, or you just had a bit of bad news. I find if I get a bit of bad news, even something minor like something hasn't turned up in the post when it's supposed to have turned up in the post because I ordered it, right? That can throw me because I'm annoyed, right? And when I'm annoyed, even mildly annoyed, I'm not creative, right? I'm kind of like, where the hell is it? It's supposed to be here. And that's kind of like, why isn't it here? Because if it was here, I could do it now. and then I can do the creative stuff tomorrow, right? Whereas actually it's going to turn up tomorrow now, ruin my creative day by interrupting. So I ought to be creative now, but I can't be creative now because I'm annoyed. Okay. And so your emotional response to things will impact how creative you are. First time chat from a slime cleric. Heyo, hello to you as well. First time chat from Bayer Maru there. Hello, good to see you. So it's like a leaky faucet. Sometimes it's just there, and sometimes nothing is coming. When there's accumulation of smidges of water that eventually become a drop that falls off. Yeah. So be aware of how your creativity works. I mean, you can encourage your creativity by getting into routine. Now, I find that with things like getting good sleep, for example. If you put yourself into a routine, so your body is sort of acclimatized to, okay, I get a warm, nice drink at 8 p.m. and I get into pajamas and I have a shower. Whatever your nighttime routine is, if you stick to a routine, that tends to help you sleep better. It's not a panacea, but it tends to help. Creativity, I find, is kind of the same. If you can kind of coerce it into, okay, it's time to be creative, you can help. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it can help. So the little habits you have as a creative person, right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to have a cup of coffee, I'm going to open up the word process, I'm going to scroll to the right place, I'm going to do a little bit of editing from yesterday's session. Now I'm in the zone. Okay, maybe the right piece of music, whatever it happens to be. Little habits. Habits are good for creativity, I find. A lot of people say, "Oh, habits. Things must be different. We must be spontaneous." No, actually, the comfort of a routine actually is quite a good thing, I think, for creativity, because it gives you like a little box for the creativity to happen in. So there we go. Steve Shaw, hello Steve, good to see you, fella. Very creative, but I let myself down on that side just the way some of us are. Good evening. But don't be negative. Don't be negative about yourself. It's hard, and it's good to acknowledge that it's hard to do these things. Okay, if it was easy to write a book, everyone would do it, right? And most people don't, because it's hard work. It's like any creative thing. If you want to do something to a high level of quality, you have to put a lot of work in. And people underestimate that amount of work drastically. And an awful lot of people don't appreciate it, either. It's an awful lot of work. And there's nothing... there's nothing around that. You can't get away from the fact that it's an awful lot of work, and therefore... that's a lot of energy to expend on doing a thing. So yeah. Anyway, yes, it's good to see you, Steve. Yes, a long time no see. Thank you very much for popping back in the stream. That's really, really cool. Good to see you, sir. So setting realistic expectations of yourself and what you can achieve in terms of writing is, I think, fundamental to good mental health. If you start comparing yourself, why aren't I J.K. Rowling yet? Or why aren't I, Alistair Reynolds? Or why aren't I, etc., J.R. Tolkien? That's only a route to disappointment. Don't do that. Okay, don't underestimate how hard it is to do this thing. Be very, very wary of, how easy it is for the public at large. Let's not personalise, but the public at large to dismiss what you do and deem it of no value, or just obliterate it with a kind of dismissive glance. That's very easy. So, given all of those things, what you have to do, I think, from a kind of mental health perspective, is be very aware that those things exist and they're real dangers to you as a writer. The imposter syndrome is a thing. Okay, there will be, why the hell am I doing this? I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Otherwise I would be successful, right? Clearly I'm not good enough. Well, those things, are reactions to hard work, I think. You have to put a lot of hard work in to get a result, and the results aren't guaranteed. And all the time you're struggling to get anywhere, that's when it's very easy to give space to those kind of negative kind of voices. So yeah, it's tricky. Steve got a video camera, started back making things. I moved my creative another way, did solid 3D models, make some films, and have an Elite Dangerous actually, mate. It's a project I will start. Nice. Okay, well done, Steve. Keep being creative. It's all good stuff. So yeah. So all of those things are occupational hazards and environmental dangers, I think, for the writer, and particularly I think if you're a person who is not naturally outgoing, those things can be very, very draining indeed. What we've discussed on the stream a number of times. One of the problems of being a writer is that it's not just about writing the book. You've got to be technically good. You've got to have that creative spark and a willingness to get stuck in and do some hard work. But quite a few people can do that. But you've also got to turn your hand to lots of other skills as well. Publicity and marketing and putting your face out there and all those sorts of things does not come naturally to most of us. A very few of us absolutely love it, but most of us don't, because I just want to write the thing. I don't want to. Don't have to do anything else. I'm just a writer. Somebody else can do the promotion. But unless you're a very strange individual who's talented in all of those things simultaneously, it's quite daunting as well. And there's an awful lot of things to manage. So so be aware of it. This is not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to stick at, and you're going to need support to manage it. There's nothing shameful in admitting that this is a hard thing, and it can go wrong in the sense that you don't get there and you get demotivated and all those kind of things. I personally have never experienced writer's block, for example, but I can understand what it's like. If you're desperately wanting to write something, you just can't think of what to write. That's not easy. Steve says, damn hard, but nothing worth doing is easy. Well, that's very true, and you've got to stick at it. Be under no illusions that it's not tricky. So there's a certain level of resilience that you need, and I think you do need, in the ideal world, a bunch of people around you who can support you, who get what you're trying to do and encourage you onwards, which is kind of what these writing streams are mostly about, really. To ensure that there is sort of other people around who can get what you're doing, because that can just help. There's other people who are crazy like me. We can share in the disaster together. That's and some things will work and some things won't. Those are all difficult things to kind of wrestle with as well. Infamous says, if you make 5 projects that you have to update or keep the pages updated, even if you're skilled, it can become an immense amount of work to put everything out. So you've got to set yourself realistic targets as well. So if you dilute yourself too much by doing too many things, you end up spinning so many plates that you never get anything done. There is a danger. I tried this. I tried to write. What was I doing? Was it one of the Elite books? Yeah, I think I was trying to do. Was it? I can't remember. Anyway, it was one. I basically tried to write 2 books at the same time. I thought I can swap between this, and I can swap between. I think it was Premonition and Lords of Midnight. I think they seem to have overlapped in my head a little bit at the timescale. So it might have been those 2. It might have been some others. I tried to write 2 books at the same time, thinking I can context switch between them, and I'll generate 2 books. It won't be as fast, obviously, but I'll get 2 books out kind of in parallel. I found I couldn't do it. I had to admit to myself that I'd made a tactical error. I basically mucked up, and it wasn't a process that worked for me. I couldn't get it to work, and it was too stressful and it was too much hard work. So I had to put one book on hold, and concentrate 100% on the other one, in order to get both of them to go forward. That was a lesson to me, that actually no, it didn't work for me to try and multitask. It wasn't effective, and it got quite stressful. And therefore, I had to kind of basically, and it was particularly stressful because basically what I'd said to the recipients of both books was, it'll be ready by here because I've got a plan, right? And what I had to say to one of the recipients of the books basically saying, no, sorry, I'm just not going to make that target. It's going to be 6 months later. And that's, particularly for me, that was a really hard thing to do, because I don't like letting people down when I've made a firm commitment, right? But I didn't have any choice, because it just wasn't going to work. It was either that or I was going to crash and burn in all cases. So I found that I had to focus on one thing at a time, otherwise I just couldn't guarantee completing it. It just didn't work for me. Now, you may be different. Again, all of these things are generic kind of advice that may or may not be specific to you. It's finding your own way through it, what works and what doesn't work. What I would definitely say is, if you have a process that works, stick with that. Don't try and copy somebody else's process. I have a lot of people who insist on telling me that I should be using Grammarly, for example, or I should be using what's that product that loads of people swear by for writing. I can't remember what it's called. Something. Anyway, there's a tool for writing which chops things into chapters and does weird stuff for you. And I've looked at it and it didn't work for me. I didn't like it. Okay, I just stick with a good old-fashioned Word document and I write. That works for me. Okay, but I still get people say, "Oh, you should try Scrivener." There we go. That's the one. Scrivener. So I tried Scrivener, and I didn't get on with it. Okay, and that's not a criticism of Scrivener. Lots of people like it. I don't. Okay, I'm quite happy with the way I produce my books in Word. Okay, I just use boring old word processor, right? And that's the way I work. Okay, is that good or bad? No, it's just the way I work. Okay, but I still get people coming up to me saying, "Oh, well, you should try Scrivener. You'll be better." I said, "No, I don't. I've tried it. I've tried it. It didn't work for me. I've gone back to Word. Thanks very much. It's fine. It's not a problem. I'm okay." In a Scrivener-free environment, it's good. If you like Scrivener, great. All right. Don't try and convert me to your Scrivener religion. I'm not going to become a Scrivenite or whatever it is. So I'm used to the way Word works. I don't have to think when I'm using Word, because I know it so well after 15 years or whatever it is. I know where everything is. I know how it works. I just press the same buttons in the same order and it does the things, right? Mad Monksoft has got to go. Wifey is calling. Well, important things. Mad Monksoft, go for it. So Jan, I think he prefers Word as well. Now, that's not a criticism of Scrivener. I'm sure it's a very, very clever piece of software if I could be bothered to learn how to use it. But if the tool starts getting in the way of the job, then it's not the right tool. Don't feel under any peer pressure to do things in a certain way because somebody else on the internet says this is the best way to do it. It might be the best way for them, but it isn't necessarily the best way for you. Don't succumb to the peer pressure. Okay, don't succumb to the writing success stories. Don't succumb to the it must be this way because this is the correct way of doing things. There is no correct way. Just work out what works for you, even if it's not efficient. Okay, because your creative process is the process by which you create something. If that means you use 16 paintbrushes and then wash them up at the end because you don't like mixing paints, that's fine. Maybe you could be more efficient and just use one paintbrush. But if it works for you, that's fine. Okay, use whatever tool you fancy that makes you comfortable. It doesn't get in the way of doing what it is that you have to do. Glenn says, I think I tried making Campfire and it felt like it was too busy work for me and took the joy out of it. Well, there you go. That's the response, I think I thought that I'm a plotter, but maybe I lean more to being a pantster and I'm in denial about it. Again, be careful of the whole plotter and pantster thing. I'm a plotter because that's just me. Pantstering is absolutely fine. That's a very strange word, pantstering, but both of those approaches work. You can write novels either way, and there's pros and cons to both. So just because I have my way of doing things, that's not the right way of doing it. That won't necessarily work for you. So be wary of that as well. It's a very personal thing, and again, from a kind of a mental health perspective, have the confidence to believe in yourself that what you're doing is okay. give yourself permission to say, yes, this is the way I do it, and that's all right. Don't have, don't let the internet at large, or people with lots of Twitter followers basically tell you that way is wrong, because it isn't. If it works for you, it's okay. Certainly read things with a view of maybe I could use that. That's not a bad idea. Try it, give it the benefit of the doubt, but don't become a slave to other people's methods. There is a middle road, says Alan, between plotting and pantsing. There is, and to be honest, I'm there because I plot the outlines, but I don't plot any of the conversations I have to get to the plot point. So, for example, a plot point for me would be character A and character B, confide in each other to bring down character C. That would be the plot. Whereas the pant string comes in exactly how on earth are characters A and B going to, what are they going to say? What's their conversation going to be like? And that's the creative bit that I do. So I know where I'm going, but the detail of how I'm going to get there hasn't been worked out. So that's a halfway house, because if you plotted out everything, then you'd have the novel, right? Although it might not be very interesting. So, Jan, I recently read about writing by Gareth L. Powell. Now, I've been to have a chat with Gareth actually at some point. That would be really good. Found it quite inspirational, not so much in the way of how to do stuff, but could kick up the backside with some really good tips. Well, that's good. So, pick up tips from other people. Just don't necessarily gold plate them. As this is the thing, and if it doesn't work, there's something wrong with me, because it may or may not work. Okay, so bear those sort of things in mind. So. Your whole state as you approach this is important. It's motivation to keep going through all that kind of hard work, particularly when whilst you're writing a book, there's very little encouragement that goes on, because there's nothing to be encouraged about. There's nothing to see. There's no people can't go, oh yes, I'm sure the book's brilliant, because I've read all the way up to chapter 8 so far. It's fantastic. I wonder what happens next, because nobody's doing that for you other than you at this point too. So how do you keep yourself motivated in the midterm? Well, that's where I find social media is actually rather good. I find that quite good. Now, the way I do it is I like to post up a word count every so often, and I have been known to do little sneak previews of bits and pieces in the book. If they're not reading anything particularly interesting plot-wise. So I find posting up to Twitter, hey, I've just hit 76,000 words, yay, go me, because I get a bit of response. People go, yay, well done, looking forward to it, and that's a little bit of encouragement to kind of keep going. So I found word counts are quite good like that. A lot of writers don't like word counts because they say, oh, well, it will go down when you start editing. Well, yeah, it will, but this is a word count aiming towards the end of the first draft, and then I'll start editing. So it's forward progress. That's the thing that I find very useful about it. Social media in general is a funny thing, but I think posting up a little bit about I've got this far, yay, go me, is and people give you a bit of encouragement. It's quite nice. That's it. That's a handy thing to give you something, and you need some encouragement. Okay, it's not wrong to want some encouragement because you're doing a hard work thing, right? So if you just spent the last 2 or 3 hours working on something and you've got 1,000 words to show for it, that's a perfectly reasonable thing, I think, to stick on Twitter and go, yay, go me. Because if you've seen some of my tweets recently, I've gone back 100 words, but I fixed the political problem. That's progress. Even if the word count's gone down. So there's nothing wrong with posting up about those sort of things. And I think readers actually quite like that, because they like to see what kind of where you are and how it's going, and are you struggling with some other bits and pieces. And if you've got a bunch of other writers around you, then they can basically, if you are stuck, they can chuck ideas in and keep you going. So just keep trying things. Always keep trying things. All the time. I think having a kind of community of peoples about you is a useful thing as well, even if it's just online, because you can kind of commiserate and encourage each other along in the process of doing things. I think that's quite an important part of it. Do I mean like the naming of a mission to Uranus? You're asking the public that? That was insane, wasn't it? No, there are some things that there's no point asking at all, because people won't be successful. Social media in that regard is a funny thing. I mean, I can stick up something that I think is quite important. Like, I got this far in my book, and I'll get like 10 likes. Yay! I can stick up some stupid quote like I did this morning, and everyone goes, "Yeah, that's really funny." 85 likes. I'm looking at it going, maybe I should just spend all day writing witty things on Twitter. But that doesn't get the books published, does it? It's a funny animal. It's a funny animal. But in general terms, just engaging with people, having a bit of fun on social media, I think is a good thing for writers to do. It's a bit of a chill out time. So I use social media as a bit of like I can post something on Twitter if I hit a word count. Okay, so it's like a little reward. You can spend 5 minutes on social media if you do this, and having a bit of discipline over when when you're allowed to do it and when you're not allowed to do it, I find personally quite helpful, because it keeps me like, no, I'm writing at the moment, I'm not going to do Twitter right now, and then okay, it's got to lunchtime, I'm going to do something stupid and put that on Twitter. And I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of my creativity. I did find back when I was writing my first Elite book, The Reclamation, I did a lot of blogging on the way through. And I did get some criticism from some people saying, you spend all this time writing these blogs, why don't you just get on with writing the book? My response to that was, well, the blog sort of helped me keep going, because I'm explaining to you where I've got to. That helps me get motivation for the next bit. So it's a vital part of the kind of mechanics of keeping the writing going, even though it appears that I've just written 1,000 words in a blog, which I could have written in the book, but it's not the same sort of writing, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's worth having something else that you do that's also a bit creative, that allows you to recharge a bit for the main event. So it could be blogging, it could be YouTubing, it could be doing something else completely different. All of those things. Another tip that I would give you is some physical exercise. It doesn't have to be like super strenuous. So I'm not saying like get on the floor and give me 40. I'm not saying that. If you want to go jump away from the keyboard right now and do 40 press-ups, then feel free. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. A change of scene. I wouldn't normally recommend spending more than a couple of hours at the keyboard in one session, because I think it's probably not all that good for you, to be honest. So I would usually take a break around the 2-hour mark, and go and get some fresh air, make myself a cup of tea, go and stand in the garden for 5 minutes, get some fresh air, maybe wander up to the park, or depending on where you are, all those sort of things. Get some non-computery time into that thing, unless you're absolutely on a roll and you're really cranking words out. Don't interrupt your creative stream if it's really kind of charging ahead. 50 push-ups, but do get some fresh air. Do break the routine up a bit by getting some outside time, because the daylight is good for you, the fresh air is good for you. I get a lot of good ideas when I'm on the dog walk. Steve just says open the window. That's not quite the point, Steve. Saying actually get away from the computer. Switch off. Look into the distance. Look to the horizon. Get some fresh air. Maybe we walk around a bit. Okay, because walking around a bit, it just moves the blood around your body a bit more, and it refreshes the parts other beers can't reach. Now, it's not quite right. You know what I mean? That can be good for your physique. It can be good for your respiration, all those kind of things, which all do have an impact on your kind of mental well-being. If your body isn't quite woken up because it's just been sitting around all day and all you've been doing is doing a bit of exercise with your fingers, it's not as good for you. So your mental health can be keyed off your physical health quite easily. So all those sort of things. So all of those things are things to consider, I think. I mean, I try and do a little bit of cycling most days if I can. I didn't get down to doing it today because I ran out of time. Or sometimes, I mean, I used to go for a drive, but it's just way too expensive now to actually go driving somewhere just for the hell of it. What do you mean? You can't afford the petrol to do that. Chatting to some people and interacting with things. Depending on the kind of person you are. I mean, I don't really like doing that. I wouldn't choose to. I don't mind doing it, but I wouldn't choose necessarily to do it. I like my own company. I'd go for a dog walk or wander around the woods or something like that. But it depends on who you are and what you like to do to unwind or stroke recharge. But do some of that stuff. Don't try and cram in, 8 hours solid work at laptop, because your productivity will drop off a cliff if you try and do that. Top tip: you can work on your muscles by throwing the computer out of the window when your work in progress is being argumentative. That is true. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it's an option. It's an option. You can try that sort of stuff. But do look after yourself. I think that's the crucial thing here. Be aware that what you're doing writing is draining, mentally, physically, etc., etc. You're not doing it just because it might feel like a bit of a hobby, or it might feel, or society views it as a bit frivolous, perhaps, or you're just sort of, you're not really doing it seriously. You're just sort of wasting your time writing that book, kind of stuff. There's a tendency to just trivialise it and go, this is something I do. But no, it's actually quite a draining activity, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to recharge your kind of internal batteries in whatever way it is that you prefer to do that, you will start running out of juice. You will start running out of energy. You will start running out of motivation. And then it gets harder and harder and harder and harder, and you get more and more tired. So, burnout in writing is definitely a thing that some writers hit. And then that can have negative impacts on all sorts of other parts of your life. So you need to be a bit careful about those things. Just, the phrase nowadays is be mindful, be aware of it as a thing, so you can take appropriate safeguards. Fine, throw someone else's computer out the window. Whatever works for you guys. That's going to be expensive in computers. You're going to need to sell a lot more books if you start throwing your computer out the window. The other thing, just practical little tips, back things up a lot, right? There's nothing worse than, there is nothing worse as a writer than going, right, I've just spent 1,000 words and I've just spent the last 3 hours getting that perfect, and my USB stick has just crashed, and my computer's crashed, I didn't save it, all that sort of stuff. Just don't, all right? Be careful, save often, have backup copies, all of those things, because you don't want to be in a rage of lost words because computer crashed. That's horrendous enough when you're doing something, writing an email, let alone when you've just written 1,000 words and forgotten to save it. Okay, that's not going to do any wonders for your mental state at all. So all those sort of things, backing things up, get into the habit of doing it. It is a job, okay? It's work, so do it well. Get into a routine for it and do it. I'm not saying professional in the sense of being utterly rigid, but do have, take it seriously. I'm doing a serious thing here. I'm writing a book. Therefore, I'm not going to be mucking about, by not saving regularly or having a backup copy or, all those things. Take it seriously, but don't stifle your creativity by being super serious or super professional or rigid. But bear in mind that you're doing something where you're creating a lot of value, and you don't want that value to be destroyed by accident if you can avoid it. So I have multiple backups. For example, so my PC backs up to a NAS server. This is just practical stuff. It backs up to a NAS server which is downstairs. That backs itself up to the cloud, such that in the event I've got 3 copies. Basically, always have 3 copies of a thing that's important. Have the copy of the copy, and then have the copy of the copy. Right? So my backup is blame somebody else. Um, so basically, do have multiple copies in case something goes wrong. You can get it back, because that's just a horrible situation. I've seen a few writers on Twitter who basically, kind of almost crying out to the internet, I've just lost, whatever thing because my file corrupted. I mean, the worst one actually is not so much you've just lost 1,000 words, but you had a power cut or something when you were saving, and the entire file got corrupted. It won't load, or your computer died a death, and it was on your hard disk, and the hard disk is corrupted, and you can't get anything back. As distressing as those things are, and you can offer any sympathy you can, at the end of the day, if you didn't have a backup copy of whatever you're working on, you have been a bit stupid, right? Because technology isn't perfect, and it's not a helpful thing to say to somebody on Twitter at that point in time, obviously. But at the end of the day, that is what's happened. You have been stupid, I'm afraid, Mr. Writer or Mrs. Writer, and by not having a backup copy. So don't do that to yourself. That's an entirely avoidable problem. Have multiple backups of things. So there's lots of little bits like that in there, that just avoid pain wherever possible. Pain is a good thing to avoid. It can happen. Okay, it can happen. So have a backup copy. And don't trust just a single backup, because I've seen USB disks fail, I've seen computers crash and corrupt files. Sometimes you can get into your own little tizzy as well. I've had situations where I've saved the wrong version of a file, thinking I was working on one version of the file, and suddenly realised I was editing another version, and I've deleted the wrong one. Due to a complete brain failure. Okay, so have a think about your own stupidity as well, and take steps to provide proof against that. Put it all on cassette tapes. Check that the process that you follow is actually is got some safety in it as well. That's an important thing. And like I say, whilst I do feel sorry for people who screw up with backups and things, I don't have a great deal of. I do have sympathy for them, because I'm empathetic with the pain that they're suffering at that point in time. So that I do have sympathy for them in that regard, but I don't have sympathy for them when they basically say, "Oh yeah, but I didn't take a backup because I didn't." And it's like, well, you've kind of been stupid. Sorry. Because there's nothing anybody can do to help with you other than go, oh, that's really bad, isn't it? Which is about the only constructive thing you can do, because there's nothing for it, because you've lost everything because you've been stupid. And it's a hard lesson to learn, that one. So don't, take advice on it. Get some backups, right? It's very, very important. And always save if you leave the computer, because all you need is your cat or a toddler or something like that to wander up and go, look what I can do. I have come back to my keyboard once when I left it unlocked and the cat was sitting on it, and I came back to 17 screens full of Zs, which fortunately hadn't done much damage to the file, but it's like the screen was rolling off the screen just full of Zs. I thought, that's not going to work. That's not really a very good story. So back up. Don't cause yourself any unnecessary pain. It's hard enough as it is without losing any work in the first place, and so on and so forth. So I mean, what else can I say? Look after. It's a good story, cat language. Yeah, look after yourself. Okay. So to summarise, don't do stupid stuff. Take sensible precautions. Save often and keep backups, etc., etc., etc. Be mindful that you are embarking on something difficult. Be mindful that you're embarking on something that takes a lot of effort over a long period of time, and therefore will be draining. You are entitled to some time off. You are entitled to, taking breaks from things. Don't put yourself under too much pressure to complete things at a certain time. Set realistic goals. Try and be realistic. Maybe bounce those ideas off other people to see if they are realistic. There will be times when the voices call. You are rubbish at this. You are never going to be able to finish this. You're never a good author. You can't write for toffee. Those voices, we all get them. Okay, we all get them. You can ignore them, and you know, the best remedy for those sort of things, I think, is to talk to other people and get some reassurance that yes, those things happen, but we don't need to listen to them. But they're all there, okay? You know, the imposter syndrome. So, you know, acknowledge that there are threats out there like that will come and try and haunt you. You know, bear in mind that you're putting your creative stuff out into a world that doesn't really give a damn whether or not they offend you or not. So people don't have to be kind when they read, view, you know, appreciate your work. So you may ultimately you will always get some negative reactions to your stuff. So you know that's the thing. Be prepared for it. You know, you have to have a relatively thick skin as a writer, because some people won't like what you do. Okay, that's just inevitable. So all of those things you need to bear in mind as you go through this process of writing. You need to be resilient. You need to have people around you that can help you be resilient. Don't go into it kind of alone and thinking it's just going to be easy, because it won't be. Prep for the fact there's going to be some tough stuff in there that you're going to have to deal with. That's just the way it is. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm not trying to put people off, but I'm saying, be aware that it's a bit of a minefield out there, and it can be hostile territory. So put on a flak jacket, tighten the belt a little bit, and trudge onwards through the minefield. It can be hard work. So there we go. So look after yourselves, my friend. Look after yourselves. Don't underestimate the toll that writing can take on the human psyche. But there we go. So look after yourselves is the bottom line, I think, and that's probably a good place to stop. Look after yourselves. Self-help, self-care, I think is good. Just be mindful. That's the thing. That's a good phrase. Right. So next week we start with our interview series. I think that's going to be quite good fun. That's going to be a bit different for what we've done on the stream before. I think that's going to be quite interesting. I shall try and be the ideal host and keep the conversations, chuttering onwards. So Kate and Kay next week. So I'll get that organised, and we will go from there. If you want to pop into Fantastic Books Publishing's Mabel thing and find out what else is going on, there are a bunch of other activities as well. It's not just me wittering on with interviews. So there's a bunch of other activities going on as well. They're on Facebook, and that's also on their website. So have a look in there and see what you can. There's a mixture of sort of science fiction and other bits and pieces that they're publishing, so it's probably quite relevant. A link for you. Let me put. That's a very good idea, Glenn. What a good idea. Here is the schedule. That is a very good idea. Why didn't I think of that? See, that's why you're here, Glenn. Okay? Give me good ideas. There's the actual schedule page. And check out this page for live updates. So it sort of starts on the 17th of September and goes through to the end of October. The various other bits and pieces in there. So and Alan we'll get some bits and pieces in there for you as well. I think that would be really good. And go for there. So fantastic stuff. Take care, my friends. Be good. Look after yourselves. I will see you next week for some interviews. I think all my streaming should be up to running normally this week for the first time in many weeks. Look after yourselves. Be good. Keep writing. Always write on. And I'll see you soon. To Harry89, sorry, I only caught the stream for the last half an hour, but was listening very interesting. Thanks for doing that, and good advice now I can use. Good stuff. Excellent. Well done. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care, my friends. See you soon, and be good. Right on.